Greenwich, Connecticut, in 1975 was the kind of place where people didn't lock their doors at night. An affluent, historic town tucked along the Long Island Sound, it was known more for polo matches and private schools than crime scenes. Among its most exclusive neighborhoods was Belle Haven, a gated community of old money and manicured lawns where the powerful mingled and privilege ran deep. That October, the air in Belle Haven carried the sense of autumn leaves and anticipation. Mischief Night, the eve of Halloween, was a local tradition, marked by harmless pranks, toilet-papered trees, and teen laughter echoing in the dark. No one could have imagined that it would end in horror. 15-year-old Martha Moxley was preparing for a night out with friends. Blonde, bubbly, and athletic, she had recently moved to Belle Haven from California with her family. Her father, David Moxley, was a senior executive at a large accounting firm. Her mother, Dorothy Moxley, described her daughter as kind, curious, and full of life. Martha fit into Greenwich life quickly. She played basketball, sketched in her free time, and had a circle of close friends. That night, October 30, 1975, Martha left the house around 6:30 p.m., planning to meet up with her friends in the neighborhood. They were gathering at the Skakel residence, a sprawling mansion just a few houses away. The Skakels were well known in Belle Haven, part of the Kennedy clan through their matriarch Ethel Kennedy, widow of Senator Robert F. Kennedy. The 7 Skakel children, raised mostly by nannies and tutors after the death of their mother, had reputations for wild behavior. The father, Rushton Skakel Sr., was a wealthy, often absent figure, heir to a coal fortune. Martha had grown particularly close to 2 of the Skakel boys, Tommy, 17, and Michael, 15. That night, according to friends, she was seen flirting with Tommy. The teens listened to music, played pranks, and hung out by the pool. One witness later recalled seeing Martha walking off with Tommy into the dark around 9:30 p.m. That was the last time she was seen alive. When Martha didn't return home that night, her mother grew concerned. It wasn't like her to stay out late, especially on a school night. The next morning, around 12:30 p.m., Dorothy Moxley went outside to search the yard. What she found would shatter the quiet peace of Belle Haven forever. Beneath a pine tree on their property lay Martha's body. She had been brutally beaten and left face down in the grass. Her jeans and underwear were pulled down, her skull crushed. Nearby, a broken golf club lay in pieces, used both to strike and stab her. The violence was shocking, personal. Police were called immediately. The investigation began, but from the very start, the case was plagued with issues. The murder weapon, a 6-iron golf club, was quickly identified as part of a set belonging to the Skakel family. But in a neighborhood where everyone had access to one another's homes and where children roamed freely, proving ownership wasn't enough. Tommy Skakel was questioned early, telling police he had last seen Martha around 9:30 p.m. and went inside to do homework. Michael Skakel, meanwhile, claimed he had gone to a cousin's house around that time and wasn't home until later. Detectives found themselves navigating not only a murder scene, but a social minefield. The Skakels, with their wealth and Kennedy connections, were protected by silence, lawyers, and influence. Witnesses were reluctant, statements changed, and in the days before DNA forensics and advanced crime scene analysis, police were left with broken fragments of evidence and more questions than answers. The community mourned Martha. Her funeral was held just days later, filled with classmates and grieving neighbors. But beneath the grief was a growing sense of unease. The killer was likely someone close, someone from Belle Haven. And they were still free. As weeks turned to months, then years, Martha's case faded into silence. The broken golf club sat in evidence, the names of Tommy and Michael Skakel lingered in hushed conversations. But no arrests were made, no confessions came. The Moxleys moved forward as best they could, but Dorothy never gave up. She wrote letters to officials, pushed investigators, and kept her daughter's name alive. "I always believed the truth would come out," she later said. "It was just a matter of time." That time would take over 2 decades. And when the truth finally began to emerge, it would reveal a world of privilege, power, and secrets buried beneath manicured lawns and elite silence. But in 1975, all anyone knew was that a beautiful teenage girl had been murdered under the stars in one of America's wealthiest neighborhoods, and no one, not even the police, seemed able to do anything about it. Long before her name became etched in one of America's most chilling unsolved murders, Martha Moxley was simply known as the bright new girl in Belle Haven, a girl with a sunlit smile and California confidence. Born on August 16, 1960 in San Francisco, Martha was the youngest of 2 children born to David and Dorothy Moxley. Her father's job as an executive with the accounting firm Touche Ross brought the family across the country when Martha was just 14. They settled in Greenwich, Connecticut in the summer of 1974, a dramatic shift from the laid-back West Coast to the buttoned-up East Coast. Still, Martha adapted quickly. She enrolled in Greenwich High School, where her intelligence and vibrant personality stood out just as much as her looks. She was blonde, athletic, artistic, and incredibly sociable. Teachers admired her discipline, and classmates adored her. Martha played basketball, loved to draw, and kept a journal, a private space where she recorded her thoughts, crushes, and experiences. The Moxleys were not as wealthy as some of their Belle Haven neighbors, but they were comfortable, respectful, and quietly proud. Their home sat just a few doors away from the Skakel mansion, and it didn't take long before Martha became friendly with several of the neighborhood teens, including the Skakel boys, Tommy and Michael. Tommy, at 17, was tall, confident, and charming. Michael, 15, was more troubled, a misfit in a house of misfits. Their father, Rushton Skakel Sr., was the brother of Ethel Kennedy, making them part of the larger Kennedy legacy. But this was no Camelot fairy tale. The Skakel household was chaotic. Their mother, Anne, had died of cancer in 1973, and Rushton, largely absent and alcoholic, left the children to be raised by staff and tutors. The Skakel boys were known for their rebelliousness. They drank, partied, and frequently got into trouble. Rumors of domestic strife, outbursts, and even cruelty toward animals circulated in the neighborhood, but the Skakels were protected by their name and money. Despite the red flags, Martha, like many teens, was drawn to the Skakels' magnetic chaos. Her journal entries reveals a complicated emotional map. She liked Tommy, was unsure about Michael, and often felt caught between being friendly and being flirtatious. One journal entry dated just days before her murder read, "Michael was so upset that I was flirting with Tommy. He gets jealous. I told him he has no right. I don't like him that way." The Skakel house was a hub for neighborhood teens. Its pool, privacy, and lack of supervision made it the go-to place for unsupervised hangouts. Mischief Night 1975 was no exception. That night, the group of teens gathered at the Skakels' house, played music, sprayed shaving cream, and wandered the neighborhood doing pranks. To any outside observer, it seemed like typical teenage fun. But underneath it all were complicated dynamics: jealousy, teenage infatuation, unspoken tensions. Dorothy Moxley would later recall sensing no danger that night. Martha had told her where she was going and promised to be home by curfew. Dorothy waited up, then fell asleep, assuming everything was fine. When she woke the next morning and realized Martha hadn't returned, concern quickly turned to panic. It wasn't just that Martha was late. It was that Martha never broke curfew. The Moxley family's world would collapse that afternoon when Dorothy found her daughter's lifeless body in their own backyard. But in that moment, Martha's life was frozen in time, not as a murder victim, but as the girl she had always been: cheerful, expressive, full of potential. Her murder shattered the illusion of safety that Belle Haven had long taken for granted, and it disrupted more than just one family. It cracked the facade of an entire community. For many who knew Martha, the pain was not just in her death, but in how much life was left unlived. Her art portfolio remained unfinished. Her basketball season never began. The friends she trusted suddenly became suspects. And the journals she kept would be pored over by police, lawyers, and the media, not for the innocent reflections of a teenage girl, but as evidence in a murder case. In the years to come, the investigation would swing like a pendulum between silence and suspicion. Yet, even decades later, one truth remained clear. Martha Moxley was more than just a case. She was a light, a life, and a daughter. And her death demanded answers. To understand the Martha Moxley case, one must understand the Skakel family. Wealthy, well-connected, and dangerously unruly. Living just a few houses down from the Moxleys in Belle Haven, the Skakels were known not just for their last name, but for the chaos behind their mansion's walls. Rushton Skakel Sr., the patriarch, was the brother of Ethel Kennedy, linking the family to one of America's most powerful dynasties. But, unlike the polished, public image of the Kennedys, the Skakels lived in disorder. After their mother died in 1973, the 7 Skakel children were largely left to raise themselves. Rushton, a heavy drinker, was often away.
The key clue in the Martha Moxley murder wasn't just the violence. It was the murder weapon itself. Found at the scene were fragments of a broken 6-iron golf club, its shaft snapped from the force of repeated blows. The club had not only crushed Martha's skull, but was also used to stab her in the neck. Investigators quickly identified it as a Tony Penna brand, a premium line of clubs. A check of local homes revealed something critical. The Skakel family owned a matching set of Tony Penna clubs, except one was missing. That missing club matched the one used in the murder. It was the first clear physical link to the Skakel household. Yet even with this discovery, no arrest followed. Investigators faced an immediate challenge, proving who in the house had used it. Multiple people had access to the clubs. In a family of 7 children with live-in help and an open-door social life, fingerprints and DNA weren't enough, especially in 1975, before modern forensic techniques. The Skakels' cooperation was minimal. Their lawyers stepped in early, advising the family not to speak without legal representation. As a result, police couldn't get formal interviews or timelines that held up under scrutiny. Both Tommy and Michael Skakel gave vague, inconsistent alibis. Tommy said he last saw Martha at 9:30 p.m., then went inside. Michael initially said he was watching TV at a cousin's house, but later admitted he had returned home and climbed a tree near Martha's window. That revised story would emerge decades later, but the damage to the early investigation was already done. Neighbors reported seeing no unusual activity that night. The Skakels' large property with woods and blind spots made surveillance impossible. There were no cameras, no witnesses, and only circumstantial evidence connecting anyone to the weapon. Despite its significance, the golf club was ultimately not enough to make an arrest. In a different community or with less powerful suspects, it might have led to immediate detainment. But in Belle Haven, investigators found themselves up against wealth, legal firepower, and an uncooperative family. So the murder weapon sat in an evidence locker, silent, damning, but legally weak. It pointed clearly to the house next door, but for years, no one would be held accountable for what it had done. From the beginning, the investigation into Martha Moxley's murder collided with a barrier more powerful than any physical evidence: the Skakels' wealth, privilege, and influence. Though the broken golf club clearly came from the Skakel household, investigators quickly ran into resistance. Lawyers were brought in within days. The Skakel children were not formally interviewed by police in the immediate aftermath, only informally without recordings or sworn statements. And when they were questioned, their stories conflicted. Tommy Skakel said he and Martha kissed around 9:30 p.m., after which she left and he went inside. Michael initially claimed he was at his cousin Jimmy Terrian's house from 9:30 until after midnight. Yet other witnesses couldn't confirm these alibis, and timelines shifted over time. Despite this, no arrests were made. The Skakel name and its connection to the Kennedy dynasty created an invisible shield. Investigators later admitted that they felt pressure, subtle or otherwise, not to push too hard. The family's legal team blocked access to school records, psychological reports, and even tutors and staff. The case stagnated, leads dried up, and public pressure waned as time passed. Within months, the media attention faded. Greenwich was desperate to return to normal, and for the Skakels, normal meant life behind tall hedges with the world shut out. For the Moxleys, silence was devastating. Dorothy Moxley kept asking questions, writing letters, urging police to reopen the case, but years passed without answers. By the late 1980s, the case was cold. No one talked, no one confessed, and the walls of privilege around the Skakel family held firm. It would take decades and a private investigator willing to dig deeper before the silence began to crack. After the initial investigation stalled, the Martha Moxley case faded into near silence. From the late 1970s through the early 1990s, no arrests were made, no suspects charged. The once prominent case became just another cold file in the Greenwich Police Department. For the Moxley family, the absence of justice was unbearable. Dorothy Moxley, Martha's mother, never stopped seeking answers. She attended every hearing, contacted detectives regularly, and gave interviews to anyone willing to listen. But the momentum wasn't there. The Skakel family stayed insulated behind money, and the public lost interest. Inside the Skakel home, life went on, but not without consequence. The children, especially Michael, struggled with substance abuse, academic problems, and behavioral issues. He was eventually sent to the Ellen School, a controversial behavioral facility in Maine, where he later allegedly confessed to fellow residents, though those claims wouldn't emerge for years. Meanwhile, the Greenwich police faced criticism for their handling of the case. Crucial evidence had been mishandled or poorly documented. Suspect interviews lacked thoroughness and formality. The pressure of investigating a family tied to the Kennedys left some officers hesitant to pursue aggressively. Throughout the 1980s, the case was reviewed occasionally but never reopened, until public interest was unexpectedly revived. In 1993, journalist Dominic Dunn published A Season in Purgatory, a novel based on the Moxley case, thinly veiling the Skakel family. The book, paired with a 1996 Vanity Fair article, renewed public fascination and reignited pressure among law enforcement. By 1998, the case was officially reopened. A new generation of investigators, no longer intimidated by power or legacy, began to re-examine old evidence, forgotten statements, and long-ignored leads. The silence was ending. And soon, it would be replaced by explosive revelations that would bring the Skakel name back into headlines, this time for the darkest reasons. 2 decades after Martha Moxley's murder, public interest in the case was rekindled, not by new evidence, but fiction. In 1993, crime writer and journalist Dominic Dunn published A Season in Purgatory, a novel clearly inspired by the Moxley case. Though fictionalized, it featured a wealthy New England family hiding a deadly secret about a murdered girl and the son who may have killed her. The similarities to the Skakels and Martha Moxley were unmistakable. The book struck a nerve. Dunn, who had covered high society crime cases for Vanity Fair, had long been fascinated by how power and privilege shielded the guilty. His novel amplified interest in the long-forgotten murder and introduced a new generation to the unsolved case. Public pressure increased. In 1996, journalist Mark Furman, best known for his controversial role in the O.J. Simpson trial, also took an interest. He began investigating the case independently and released his book Murder in Greenwich in 1998, accusing Michael Skakel directly. Furman's book, paired with Dunn's earlier work, caught the attention of Connecticut officials. The state's cold case unit reopened the investigation that same year. Detectives began reviewing forgotten evidence, and most importantly, they interviewed former classmates of Michael Skakel from the Ellen School. Some of them claimed that Michael had confessed to killing Martha during emotional outbursts or disciplinary sessions at Ellen years earlier. While some details were questionable, it was the first real break in years. Investigators also uncovered inconsistencies in Michael's original alibi. He had told police he was at his cousin's house the night of the murder, but later admitted that he returned home, climbed a tree near Martha's window, and masturbated while watching her house. Though he claimed he never went further, the shift in his story was alarming. By 1999, the case had new energy and a clear target. In January 2000, after 25 years of silence, privilege, and suspicion, a warrant was issued for Michael Skakel's arrest. What began as a fictionalized mystery had reignited a real-life murder case, and now the boy next door was finally facing the consequences. By the late 1990s, the pressure on the Skakel name intensified. The opened investigation uncovered what had long been buried, confessions Michael Skakel had made years earlier, deep inside a controversial school for troubled youth. In the late 1970s, following mounting behavior issues and substance abuse, Michael Skakel was sent to the Ellen School in Poland Spring, Maine. Ellen was known for its harsh discipline and extreme tactics. During confrontational group therapy sessions, students were often forced to confess past wrongs under emotional pressure. Decades later, investigators tracked down former Ellen students who recalled Michael saying chilling things. "I'm going to get away with murder. I'm a Kennedy. You don't know what I've done. I could have killed her. They'll never touch me." These statements weren't identical and didn't constitute formal confessions, but they strongly hinted at guilt. Some remembered Michael breaking down emotionally when Martha's name was mentioned. Others said he confessed outright, but not all details matched the evidence. In addition, Michael's own 1997 taped interviews with a ghostwriter meant for a potential autobiography became critical. On those tapes, he contradicted his original 1975 alibi, saying instead that he had returned home that night and climbed a tree outside Martha's window, watching her and fantasizing before returning home. This new version raised red flags. If Michael had admitted being near Martha's house around the time of the murder, it directly contradicted his original alibi and placed him in her yard near the estimated time of death.
In May 2002, Michael Skakel was tried for the 1975 murder of Martha Moxley nearly 27 years after the crime. The prosecution argued that Michael, angry over Martha's relationship with his brother Tommy, killed her in a jealous rage. Their case leaned heavily on Michael's changed alibi, placing him at Martha's house around the time of the murder. Alleged confessions at Elon School, where peers claimed he admitted to the crime. The murder weapon, a golf club from his home. The defense dismissed the case as circumstantial, pointing to unreliable witnesses and a lack of physical evidence. But on June 7, 2002, the jury found Michael guilty of murder, and he was sentenced to 20 years to life. It was a landmark moment. Finally, someone was held accountable. But controversy around the conviction would soon follow. Michael Skakel's 2002 conviction was celebrated by many as long overdue justice, but it didn't come without controversy. Immediately after sentencing, his legal team launched a series of appeals, claiming ineffective counsel. His trial lawyer, Mickey Sherman, was accused of poor preparation. Unreliable witnesses. Many from Elon School had credibility issues or conflicting memories. No physical evidence. The case hinged entirely on circumstantial details. In 2013, after years of legal battles, a judge agreed. Skakel's conviction was overturned, citing inadequate legal representation. He was released on bail after serving 11 years. Then, in a dramatic turn, the Connecticut Supreme Court reinstated the conviction in 2016, only to reverse itself again in 2018, finalizing the overturn due to ineffective defense. By 2020, prosecutors announced they would not retry Michael Skakel, citing the age of the case and unreliable witnesses. Though his conviction was erased, Skakel was never declared innocent. For Martha's family, the outcome was bittersweet. The fight for justice ended without full closure. The reversal of Michael Skakel's conviction left many wondering, had justice truly been served or undone? Though he had served over a decade in prison, Michael walked free in 2013. And by 2020, with the state choosing not to retry the case, it was effectively over. Still, the questions remained. Was Tommy Skakel more involved than originally believed? Why did Michael change his story if he was innocent? Would a conviction have stood with modern DNA evidence? Despite no new trial, the shadow of guilt remained. Michael never publicly apologized or admitted wrongdoing. The Skakel family maintained his innocence, calling the case a media witch hunt fueled by wealth envy. To this day, no one else has ever been charged, and Martha Moxley's murder remains officially unsolved, despite one man having been tried, convicted, and then released. For many, it was not justice denied, but justice lost in time and power. Though no one is currently serving time for Martha Moxley's murder, her case continues to haunt public memory. Books, documentaries, and news specials have kept it alive, especially because of its ties to the Kennedy family, the Skakel name, and the deep suspicion that justice was obstructed by wealth. New theories have surfaced. Some suggest Tommy Skakel may have been more involved than Michael. Others question the original police investigation and its mishandling of evidence. A few propose a third-party attacker, but no credible suspect has emerged. In podcasts and true crime forums, the case is still debated. It has become a symbol of how power can delay or distort justice. The Moxley family, especially Dorothy, remained graceful but firm. "We know who killed our daughter," she said. "We always have." Even with no official conviction on the books, the world hasn't forgotten Martha or the night her light was taken in Belle Haven. Though decades have passed, Martha Moxley remains more than a murder victim. She's remembered as a vibrant, kind-hearted teenager whose life ended far too soon. Her family, especially Dorothy Moxley, became voices for justice, not revenge. Dorothy's strength in the face of silence, delay, and power was admired nationwide. She refused to let Martha's story disappear. Over the years, Martha's friends have spoken of her laughter, her art, her love for life. In her journal, she once wrote, "I'm beginning to feel good about myself again." It's that human side, not the headlines or the courtroom drama, that her loved ones hold on to. Her murder exposed deep flaws in the justice system, especially where wealth and influence intersect with law. It also proved the power of persistence from a mother, from journalists, and from a community unwilling to forget. Today, Martha's name stands as a quiet call for accountability, fairness, and remembrance. She was more than a case. She was a daughter, a friend, a light. And that light still shines.